Starbucks isn't doing that great. In fact, it's down 40% year to date, and it's currently the 474th worst performing stock in the S&P 500. This correlates to a total market cap loss of $66.4 billion. Given how the overall market is doing though, I bet a lot of you guys aren't even surprised. The Nasdaq and Russell 2000 are officially in bear markets, and the S&P 500 is teetering between correction and bear market territory. But while it's easy to just write off Starbucks' sell-off as a result of a weak market, there's actually a lot of background factors that are prompting this sell-off. And if you don't believe me, just take a look at this. Last month, the retired father of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, returned to Starbucks to change the direction of the company. This isn't the first time Howard is leaving retirement to run Starbucks either. Back in 2008, during the height of the financial recession, Howard returned to Starbucks as CEO, and he led the company up until 2017. During this time period, Starbucks stock grew an impressive 17x from the 2008 bottom, but the company hasn't done all that much since Howard left. In fact, the stock is almost back to the same price that he left it at. This has caused many investors to question if anybody can run Starbucks other than Howard. But before we get into that, we have to look into whether Howard can even save Starbucks again in the first place. So what even happened to Starbucks? One of the top factors driving down Starbucks is worldwide shortages in almost everything, starting with labor. If you haven't heard already, a significant number of employees, especially in the US, have been quitting their jobs over the past few years. In fact, in 2021, 47 million Americans voluntarily quit their jobs. And if you didn't notice, that's literally 1/4 of the entire US labor force. Given that the unemployment rate isn't skyrocketing though, it's clear that these guys aren't just leaving the corporate world altogether. Rather, they're switching over to companies and jobs where they feel more respected and appreciated. Naturally, you would think that compensation plays a big factor in this decision as well, but this is actually not the case. In fact, dissatisfaction with one's salary does not even rank in the top 10 reasons that people are leaving their jobs. Salary dissatisfaction actually comes in at rank 16. Some of the reasons that people are really switching jobs is a toxic corporate culture and underappreciated work. And there's no question that these issues are especially prevalent within service-oriented industries like Starbucks. This trend has made it extremely difficult for Starbucks to fill positions and keep them filled. And it's not just a case of, oh, we're missing a cashier or a barista today. No, Starbucks is literally missing half of their workforce. You see, when the pandemic hit, Starbucks laid off the vast majority of their employees. Their employee count fell from 349,000 employees to 138,000 employees. Meanwhile, the number of stores Starbucks was operating never went down. It actually kept going up. We don't yet know how many of these positions Starbucks has filled since last September, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that it's not the full 211,000 positions. This means that the remaining employees are having to do even more work, which is just further motivating them to switch jobs. The staffing shortage has actually gotten so bad that some Starbucks locations have started reducing store hours. And as a business, that's usually the last thing you want to do, especially if there's sufficient demand. Aside from facing a severe staffing shortage, Starbucks is also having to deal with a supply shortage. If you go to your local Starbucks, it's more than likely that at least a few of the menu items are unavailable due to a lack of ingredients. Some of the hardest hit ingredients include oat milk, flavored syrups, and tea bags. But the shortage also extends to some of Starbucks' most popular offerings as well. Some locations don't even have Frappuccino mix or breakfast sandwiches. And just a few months ago, the entire region of upstate New York ran out of mocha. So not only are Starbucks employees having to do more work, but they're also having to constantly deal with customers that are upset that they can't even get what they came for. And the longer these shortages keep up, it's just gonna become harder and harder for Starbucks to recover. The supply shortage isn't the only reason that customers are upset either. Another issue that is driving up customer dissatisfaction is rising prices. Now, it's no secret that Starbucks is already a premium brand with expensive offerings. Many people have looked past these prices for years due to convenience and taste. However, as Starbucks continues to raise prices, it's becoming harder and harder for customers to justify going to Starbucks. The worst part is that this is not something that Starbucks even has control over. Prices across the board are simply skyrocketing, and they have to raise prices to keep up. For example, the price of coffee has doubled since 2019 from $100 a pound to over $200 per pound. Similarly, I'm sure that all of the equipment at Starbucks locations, along with their cups, spoons, and straws, have also risen in price due to out-of-control inflation. And on top of all of this, Starbucks is having to raise wages to retain the employees that they do have. Last October, they committed to increasing minimum wage across the country to $15 per hour. Now, I'm not trying to argue whether such wage hikes are justified or not. But one thing that's certain is that someone has to pay for these higher wages, and more times than not, that someone is the customer. Meanwhile, from the customer's perspective, it's not just Starbucks where they're having to spend more money. Over the past year, their cost of living has skyrocketed. Everything from gas and energy bills to grocery and housing costs have gone to the moon, while wages haven't. And there's only so many price increases that consumers can afford before they start to decrease their consumption. Necessities like gas and the groceries aren't something you can avoid, but something you can avoid is overpriced Starbucks coffee. And as inflation continues to remain high, we'll likely just see more and more people cut back on such purchases. Something else that's also leading to customer and employee dissatisfaction is Starbucks' mobile/online order system. Embracing a mobile order system was a no-brainer during the pandemic, but long-term, it seems to have caused more headaches than solutions. Here's the thing, when people come to the store and order in person, there's a natural limit to how long the line will get. I mean, if there's already 20 people in line, the people who come after are more likely to just skip Starbucks for the day. But when a significant number of people are ordering online and there's a long line at the store, fulfilling all these orders quickly becomes overwhelming, especially during rush hours with the staffing shortage. And when these online customers show up at the store, they're often upset that their order isn't ready yet. Something else to note is that when people order online, they're way more likely to make more complex orders because it's easier to click buttons than to verbally communicate such an order. This has made fulfilling online orders more time-consuming, which has just made it even harder to keep up with rush hour demand. To make things worse, their online system often doesn't reflect missing ingredients, meaning that customers are often allowed to put in orders that can't be made. This leaves the employees with two options. Either they can inform the customer that their order can't be completed when they show up at the store, which is probably not the most fun thing to do, or they can substitute the missing ingredient with an alternative that is available. But this doesn't necessarily lead to the happiest of customers either. The straightforward solution to this conundrum is for Starbucks to revamp their online system and implement two features. First of all, their online system should limit orders to a manageable volume. And secondly, their online system should accurately represent shortages. If they don't revamp their online system, we'll likely just continue to see more misunderstandings between customers and employees, causing Starbucks to lose customers over the long term. While all of the factors that we've discussed so far are definitely weighing down on Starbucks' business, likely the biggest reason behind Howard's return is Starbucks employees unionizing. For service-based businesses with hundreds of thousands of minimum wage workers, unions are often their biggest fear. Here's the thing, while Starbucks charges a ridiculous amount for their beverages, they don't actually take that much of it to the bottom line. Historically, Starbucks' net margin has hovered at just under 15%. And while this is a solid amount for a restaurant business, this doesn't give them much leeway in terms of raising wages. So, Starbucks and other low-margin companies like Amazon are extremely anti-union. But despite their attempts to stifle unions, we've seen Starbucks employees put up quite a fight over the past year. For example, remember how Starbucks committed to increasing their minimum wage to $15 per hour? Well, this was a last-ditch effort to try to stifle union participation. Before they hiked wages, they were attempting to terminate every union member they could find. They even sent managers to Starbucks locations to try to dissuade union participation. And it looks like Starbucks is simply doubling down on crushing unions. At the beginning of May, Howard announced a set of raises that will only benefit non-unionized workers. And he justified this decision with likely the most garbage reason you have ever heard. Howard suggested that he couldn't raise wages for unionized workers because that would be imposing new wages without the union's approval. Starbucks Workers United has fired back by filing charges against Howard for discriminating against union workers. This is still a very fluid situation, so we'll have to wait and see how this battle plays out. But honestly, I think Howard's best choice is to simply give in to the unions. Here's the thing, Howard can play this game as much as he wants and he might even win against the unions. But I think Howard's victory would actually be a loss for Starbucks. Over the years, Starbucks has maintained a pretty respectable image when it comes to employee benefits and treatment. But pushing vigorously against unions can easily destroy that image, and I don't think that's in Starbucks' best interest. Given that this is the primary reason that Howard has returned though, I suspect that this is going to be a bloody battle. At the end of the day, Starbucks is a mess both internally and externally. They're plagued with staff and supply shortages while having to deal with insane inflation and bad software, which is leading to pretty unhappy customers. On top of this, Starbucks is ferociously fighting against internal unionization efforts, which have thus far proven quite successful. Howard returning to Starbucks simply enunciates how critical the situation is, and unfortunately, there is no easy solution. If Howard gives into the union, Starbucks will likely have to deal with even higher operating expenses, which will just make it even harder for them to retain customers. On the other hand, if Howard doesn't give in, Starbucks will not only continue to face a staffing shortage, but they'll probably tarnish their reputation. And in my opinion, their long-term reputation is worth a lot more than short-term profits. But with that being said, if anyone can get Starbucks back on track, it's Howard. So we'll have to wait and see what he does. Do you guys believe Howard can turn Starbucks around? Comment that down below. Also, drop a like if you think Starbucks is overrated. And of course, consider checking out our international channels to watch our videos in other languages, and consider subscribing to see more questions logically answered. But until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.